I'm Susan Guynn. I'm with Clemson Extension, and I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about forest wildlife management. Today we're going to focus on what you can expect in terms of habitat management within your forest for wildlife. If you want more wildlife, you need to decide what it is you want, because just because you have an open area or you do have a forest doesn't mean that will attract the species that you're necessarily wanting. So today we're going to go around and we're going to look at some things within your forest that you can think about for managing to increase your habitat for those species that you're wanting. Behind me there's a little bit of a forested area. This is a great example of how they're using an edge to try to promote wildlife habitat. And you can see there's a soft edge over here, and there's a lot of vegetation that to most people it looks like just a bunch of weeds. But for wildlife, it's forage and it's habitat and it's food for them. So we have over here, we have some ragweed, which is a really great species for wildlife that provides a lot of nutrition for them. We also have a species of pokeweed that has been browsed. Deer love pokeweed. So when you're looking at your property, think about what's out there and what's good for the deer. Are they heavily browsed? Perhaps you don't have enough habitat out there for your species that you're looking at. But another important wildlife element that provides habitat that a lot of people don't think about are snags. And over here we have a dead tree that provides a lot of habitat. So it starts off with our primary cavity nesters. And those cavity nesters will excavate within that dead tree to provide habitat. But after they create those cavities, other species will use those cavities, such as small mammals or bats or other birds to forage as well. Once that bark starts sloughing off that dead tree, other species such as bats will actually get up under that bark and roost at night. So it provides a lot of habitat for a lot of species, even though it's dead, and a lot of people just discard it and say, hey, let's cut it down for firewood. But we also need woody debris in our streams and our rivers, and that provides a lot of habitat too, particularly for trout species. You know, we're up here at the Saluda River, where there are trout species, and they need that for spawning. And you can see behind me how a lot of trees are hanging over the river. That's keeping that water temperature down as well, which is also important for breeding for trout as well. But it also protects water quality so that when it gets downstream, it's not polluted or doesn't have a lot of sediment. And in the end of the day, we all live downstream. So protection of water quality is really important as well. Now we're seeing an area in a field that a tree had obviously fallen over. The landowner had come and cut it up and just sort of piled it up here in the middle of the field. And this is important structure as well. The down woody debris provides insects that birds can come and forage on, as well as other species. It's also great cover for small mammals such as rabbits or reptiles or amphibians that can get in here and hide from predators as well. So that structure for cover is important as well. But you can also see in here that deer are browsing these species as well. So it's also providing forage as well. And there's a lot of it going on in here that you can see. We're in September right now when we're doing this filming. The deer right now are actually in a stress period because, you know, the vegetation is starting to harden off. They're having to work harder to meet their nutritional needs, so they're foraging a lot. You also have some pollinators in here on these flowers, which is really important. So that's providing more habitat for insects as well. So when you think about wildlife, don't just think about animals. Wildlife is also plants, it's insects, it's lichen, it's anything that's a living organism should also can be considered wildlife, and it's part of a bigger picture, and we need all of it. So we have to manage for everything to make the system work properly. So even if you have a big area in the middle of your field that you don't like the way it looks, think about it from a habitat standpoint. Is there a species out there that is utilizing that particular area for either foraging or for cover that's important to them? Another consideration on your property, if you're wanting to do specific things, may be when wildlife becomes a nuisance. In this case here, you see a big bus behind me, and these particular landowners were interested in having bees on their property, but they continuously had bears getting into their hives and destroying their hives, so they had to do something a little different to exclude the bears. So their solution was to buy a bus and put the hives inside the bus, but allow the bees to be able to get out at the same time. That was their solution, but now they have pollinators, but they've also solved their bear problem without having to take out the bears. So now we're going to talk about mass. We've got hard mass and soft mass. For example, white oaks provide a nut that is considered hard mass that is a really important food source for a lot of species during the fall and winter. It's high in energy, which this time of year is what those species need going into the winter months. We also have soft mass, which you might find on, say, a dogwood that has the berries, or a persimmon tree. And these are important sources as well. A lot of species will also feed on those in order to meet those energy demands. And particularly if you have persimmons or oaks, either one, bears will eat them up until they're all gone, trying to put on that weight that they need for the winter months. So finding those species that provide that food source, such as white oaks that have the hard mass, or persimmons that have a soft mass, is really important when you're looking at your landscape if you're managing for wildlife. The one problem with the white oak mass is they're unreliable. Some years you have what they call bumper crops, which means they're everywhere. And some years you can hardly find a white oak. So it's important to have a variety of species spread across the landscape to try to provide a little more stability in that food supply for your wildlife. But again, also look to your bushes and your shrubs, such as your American beautyberry, that can also provide a food source for your species as well, that is also native to this area. For a lot of families, they have members of the family who want to hunt deer or turkey or other species, and hunting can be a great asset on a property. But for others, they may not wish to hunt, and that's okay, but there may be some considerations if you want to consider leasing out your property for hunting. For one, if you have a trespassing issue, particularly if you don't live on that land, if you're considered an absentee landowner and trespassing is a problem, the hunters that you lease your land to, for one, you're going to know them and you're going to have a relationship with them, but they will help you with those trespassing issues on your property. They can help with things like managing the perimeter, looking for dump sites, looking for people who are coming on your property without permission. Another great aspect of a hunt lease is also an annual income. So that annual income gives you hedge against maybe low timber prices along the way, but it provides an annual income, whereas in your forest management plan, you may not have that annual income. You may only realize an income every few years. So it does provide a continuous source of income. But another reason for considering a hunt lease dependent upon your property may be that if you have an overpopulation of deer, that may be hindering you from managing for something else that you are looking for. Say that that you would prefer some sort of songbirds in open areas, but the deer are browsing the species that they feed on. Therefore, they're taking away that songbird habitat. Having that hunt lease can keep that population at a level so that you can manage for other species that you are interested in, even if it is not deer or turkey or some other species. So consider a hunt lease as an option for managing trespassing, bringing in an annual income, as well as controlling the deer population in terms of being able to manage for what you want. But also consider deer, they can be a nuisance as well. So say you have a garden. You may have to build a pretty substantial fence around your garden just to keep the deer out of it so you can grow your summer crops as well. And that's another consideration, that hunters can help you with that population and keeping it in check so that you can have those gardens and other wildlife species that you're looking for.
My name is Alicia Farrell, and I'm the Wildlife Coordinator for Region 4 at South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. We are standing in a logging deck of a loblolly pine stand at Donnelly Wildlife Management Area in Green Pond, South Carolina. This stand was thinned about 2 years ago, and this is a historic logging deck. So we've actually been using this logging deck for about 20 years. When we have timber crews come in and create logging decks, we ask them to spread their debris out in the woods and not leave it on the logging deck before they leave. And then over time, what is left on the logging deck decomposes, or we push it up in a pile using a small tractor with a bucket, so that we're actually able to turn that logging deck into a food plot within a year or two after the loggers have moved out. We turn it into a food plot, and sometimes we plant it in greens for the deer, but sometimes we plant it in more seed species for the birds. So what's behind me has been planted in a mix of chufa, pearl millet, and Egyptian wheat. And then some natural forbs will come up as well underneath because of the timing of our disking. Like I said, this is really for the birds. The turkey, the quail really love these seed mixtures, but also you get hogs. Anytime you have freshly plowed, disked ground and planted, you're likely going to get hog damage. And that can create a wildlife viewing opportunity. That can create a hunting opportunity, but that also can create a nuisance opportunity. So depending on how many hogs you have, maybe your hunters can take care of them for you to thin them out. And a lot of times hunters really like to do that. But you also might need to do some trapping and removal to limit your damage if they're really wiping you out. So I am standing in front of a thinned pine stand. This was thinned about 2 years ago. And really, as far as wildlife are concerned, your normal timber operations for thinning can also greatly benefit wildlife. Anytime you are opening up the forest canopy, it lets light down to the ground, and that allows your natural plants to grow. And those plants are what most benefit the wildlife. It creates deer browse. It can create birding areas for turkey and quail, and other species as well, like your pollinators. So thinning lets light to the ground, and that creates your wildlife forage. Your thinning can be timed on whatever your forester recommends for your pine stand, and that can be in turn benefit the wildlife. So if you don't have a logging deck that you want to intensively manage for wildlife, you can also manage your fire breaks for wildlife. This fire break was disked along and along, as in it slowly cleared out any slash that was there, and then we freshly disked it about a month ago, and then just 2 weeks ago it was planted in a winter mix, and that is greens, radishes, a little bit of peas, a little bit of chufas, but really focusing on your brassicas, your greens and your radishes and things like that. This is going to be great forage for deer once it grows up, but also now with the bare ground, it's great for turkeys that are foraging on the greens, but also on the bugs that are attracted to those greens. This is great for quail, the open dirt areas. Doves will even come in here, even though we're in a forested situation, to use this open area. All of those species benefit. And then of course your deer as well that are going to use it for browse. And this opens up a great shooting lane, whether you're hunting for yourself or you have a hunting lease. And the other thing I want to mention as far as intensively managing for wildlife, you're going to keep this fire lane open anyway. And so if you keep it a little more open, a little cleaner, you're creating great wildlife opportunity. So when you're considering what seed to plant, whether you're planting in an open log deck or along a fire break, you could really go with some name brand seed mixes, and those are great. But in all actuality, they're the same thing as your brown bag seed mixes that you can get from your local feed store. You don't have to go with a name brand at all. Anything that bills itself as a winter plant mix is what you're looking for. When you're planting, of course, you want to get the absolute most out of your money that you spent. So for just a few dollars, you should conduct a soil test. You go out, you collect a soil sample, you work with your local extension office to get it mailed into Clemson for a soil test. And that will tell you if you need to lime or fertilizer. I can go ahead and tell you most places in South Carolina need lime. Always. If you're in the woods of South Carolina, you can nearly bet on it. But get your local soil test done, send it in to Clemson. They'll give you the results back. Your extension agent can help you read that, or your local NRCS office can help you read that if you're not really sure what to do with the information you get back. And then you just apply. Sometimes it's as easy as going out and spreading some lime by hand if you have a very small food plot, or you might need to rig up a spin spreader on the back of your four-wheeler, or if you have a really large property, you may even use a cone spreader hooked to the PTO shaft of your tractor. There's all kinds of things you can do. You won't know what you need until you get your soil test done. And that's really going to impact how much money you spend, how you can get the best out of the seed that you planted, and where you need to go from there. One thing I mentioned earlier was bugging areas. So birds that brood up, birds that hang out in flocks, usually like to feed on bugs. That's their primary source of nutrients, especially for the young when they're growing feathers, because that protein is a lot closer to turning into feathers when they're eating bugs. And so what they need for that is open soil and clumped grasses. So by clumped grasses, I mean not like your yard where there's a grass stem on every little nook and cranny, but dirt showing with large clumps of grasses. And this allows them to catch the bugs easily and also to dust their feathers. They use the dust on open areas like this to ward against mites and other parasites that could hide in their feathers. So you're really getting a double bang for your buck when you have a freshly dissed area like a fire break, because it creates bug opportunities for these birds, but also provides them the dusting areas they need to stay healthy. So when you're considering burning for wildlife, you need to think about seasonality. Whether you're doing an early spring burn, a summer burn, or a winter burn, you're gonna get different effects on the undergrowth, and each of those effects is important for wildlife. So if you have a large enough property to kind of do all three, you're gonna meet different stage requirements for wildlife depending on which one you do. I'll go ahead and tell you though, the most common would be an early spring burn. That's gonna help the landowner and the wildlife both achieve the results that you want. A summer burn could be harder on the landowner to do and to get the results that they want. So an early spring burn is the most common, but all three can play a role in benefiting wildlife depending on what you're able to do.